Hey everybody. So usually I take a look at more complex dual channel dash cam systems, but what if you're looking for a simple single channel front camera? Well, the de facto recommendation has been the Viofo A119, which comes in at about $80 to $100, but what if you're looking to be a little bit more frugal than that? Well, GKU was kind enough to send me their D200 single channel front camera system, and at least at first glance it looks like this has a lot of really nice features. If we look at the bottom of the box here, we can see it's got a 2K resolution. It can do 1600p. The front angle or visual angle is 170 degrees, which is about 30 degrees more than most other cameras. Most other cameras are about the 140 degree mark. Loop recording, which is pretty standard. I wouldn't expect anything less. And then on the other side, interestingly, it says it has parking mode, which would require a hardwire kit, but this, you'll see in a bit, this doesn't include that. This does, however, have Wi-Fi, and apparently they consider this to be a pretty hidden design, although it seems relatively standard to me. But anyways, let's go ahead and open this up, take a closer look, and see what you get. Okay, so looking at the contents of the GKU D200 package, over here on the left we have our 12-volt power supply cable, right? So this goes in your car's cigarette lighter, and it has a USB mini connection, so not like a USB micro. And the other thing about this cable, this is going to be 3.4 meters long, or a little bit more than 11 feet. In the middle here we have the manual, which actually has a lot of pretty decent detail in it, so I actually recommend you read it instead of just tossing it aside. Some warranty card documentation, and then up here in the middle we have some static cling sheets, which are really nice, a little bit more of a premium feature. And what these do is these stick to your windshield, and then you apply the camera with its 3M double-sided tape to the static cling sheets. And so why that's nice is these can provide a thermal barrier, so you have less heat sinking of the heat from the glass into the camera itself. Although I don't really think that's much of an issue with this mount and this hinge as well. But also it prevents the residue from the 3M double-sided tape from staying on the glass, let's say after you were to remove the camera or reposition or something. So that's nice to see. And you can see they give you 2 sheets plus an extra double-sided tape. The camera itself already has one of these pre-applied, so that's really nice to see. And then speaking of the camera itself, we can see it's got a pretty simple design, right? It's kind of a cylinder almost. Front we have a status LED or security LED if you want to turn on that feature. You have the front camera lens itself. Over here on the side we have our power input as well as the micro SD card slot. I'm kind of wondering how easy it will be to push in and out the micro SD card with this power plug right here. My guess is there's not really that great working room with that, and you'll have to unplug the power. But that may be by design, where they don't want you removing the SD card unless you remove the power and the unit is all the way off. Over on the back we can see another little status LED, so maybe this is just for driver information. You just take a quick peek at your camera, see this blinking, and you know, hey, it's working. And then over on the other side we have our power button. So talking a little bit more about the camera, as we mentioned before, this is a 2K class resolution, which is competitive for its class. This thing will do 1600p, it'll do 1440p resolutions. The front wide angle view is 170 degrees. Most other cameras are about 140 degrees. So, we'll look at the footage later and see if this gives us a fisheye effect or not. But, at the very least, you can see kind of what's going on a little bit more on the periphery. So you probably won't have the fine detail, but you'll be able to see, let's say, gross movements, which, let's say in a big accident or something, maybe that's more important. One of the other nice things about this camera is it has a capacitor inside instead of an internal battery, and capacitors are generally rated for higher temperatures than batteries, and they have a little bit better robustness. And so this camera is rated from the specs to minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit all the way up to 150 degrees Fahrenheit. It can easily get that hot in a vehicle, but as we saw, with the thermal path from the windshield here, I don't think you're going to get a lot of heat soak into that. So I think the ambient air temperature would have to be about that 150 mark. So it seems like it's pretty decent. On the micro SD side, this says it supports up to 128 gigabyte cards. That should be plenty for a single channel camera, especially only at the 2K resolution class. So you should still have plenty of recording time on that. And then another thing this thing has is it has an internal G sensor, so that means, you know, it should be software configurable where if this detects an impact, like let's say you're driving, you get into an accident, you know, you get hit and this feels some impulse, it can automatically record into, let's say, an event folder. So, you know, some of these features are quite frankly stuff you see on a little bit more premium cameras. We'll see how well they work on this guy. And then, you know, earlier I mentioned this has parking mode, which would require a separate hardwire kit, which you'd have to buy separately. Okay, so I have the camera turned on, and you can see that from the little red light here. So let's go ahead and connect the app and see what we can see in the setup menu. So I've opened my phone's Wi-Fi network and see the GKU dash cam. I'm going to select that. The password is just going to be 1 through 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And I'll turn off auto reconnect. Okay, and now that we're connected, we can go ahead and move to the app. So they recommend using this Jarvis Cam app. So we'll open that up. Add the camera. It sees it. And it says we've successfully connected. Okay, well, let's go into the camera then and see. All right, now that we are in the app and connected to the camera, you can see up here we have our preview. So this is showing us what the camera is looking at right now, which is just the box. You know, we have some record buttons here. If I hit this one, since this is the first time we've turned on the camera, it's asking to format the SD card. Same thing over here. If you look at the files, you know, it'll probably tell you the same thing because there's nothing to read. So let's go to the camera settings. And we can see up top we've got sound recording, whether you want to record that or not, so you can turn that off and on. The speaker volume, I think it was a little bit loud, to be honest, and kind of sounded distorted. So let's turn this down. Turn it to low and we'll see how that looks. Photo resolution, let's see, can we change that? Okay, yeah, we can. So let's turn it to higher megapixels, higher quality. Video resolution, it's only set at 1440p. We'll try 1600. Loop, so this is kind of nice. This is telling you the duration of the files on the camera. So default, it looks like it's set to 1 minute, so it records a bunch of 1 minute files and then it starts a new file. You can set it to longer, 2 or 3 minutes, so you don't have to go through quite as many files. I'll just leave that default for now. Anti-flicker. Oh, this is interesting. It's got some anti-flicker setting and can do 50 or 60 hertz. I'll try 60 hertz and see what that looks like. And then exposure compensation, so I guess if you look at your picture quality and it looks too dark or too bright, you can use this exposure compensation slider to change that. Video time option, so you can say, I guess maybe there's a GKU logo in the footage and you can turn that off and just have time, so we'll just try that. And delay off time, so this looks like it just how long it delays before it turns off. I'll leave this at the default 5 seconds and see how that works. Scrolling some more, we have collision sensing. So this, you know, I talked earlier about how it has the G sensor on it. So when it feels like a shock, right, it'll say, oh, you've been in an accident, and it'll do some type of event recording. So this is the sensitivity of that. I think low, we'll start with that and see, you know, if I hit a pothole and it says, oh, you've been in an accident, then I'll know, hey, even at low, this is too sensitive. A lot of the times they are too sensitive, and I usually just turn these off completely. Boot voice, whether it tells you or not, it's going to turn on, and then I guess you can change the language. Let's see. It looks like Chinese or English. I'm assuming that's what middle is. And then looks like you can change the Wi-Fi name of this. So instead of the default GKU D200, if you want to name it like, hey, my car's camera, you can do that. And that's nice too. You can also change the password because this is a Wi-Fi on all the time camera. So presumably someone could go up to your car, find the, you know, the SSID of the Wi-Fi network, and if they happen to know that the default passwords are 1 through 8, they could do that and get into your camera. So I guess that's helpful. Firmware, nothing to do here. Format SD card, we need to do this because this is a new one and the camera keeps yelling at me. So let's go ahead and format that. All right, said format complete, and you'll notice the volume of that was lower than it was before. So that was nice. I think that was a little bit more appropriate. And then I guess below we have a reset. So this is factory settings. I don't need to do that because, well, we've just configured this to how I like. Now, one other thing I will say about this is it seems like connecting to this camera via Wi-Fi and getting to the settings and whatnot is pretty darn easy to use. A lot of these other ones, you know, sometimes you have to press a stop recording button, then you can connect via Wi-Fi or whatnot. This one is a little bit more intuitive. You know, you just go to your phone's Wi-Fi networks, connect to the camera, open the app, and then, you know, go into the camera like so. So that is a plus, that they've made this pretty user-friendly and not difficult to use, not confusing. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about parking mode. And I'll be honest, it's not too intuitive with this camera. You know, earlier when I was showing you the app menu options, there wasn't something in there for parking mode, which really surprised me. And part of the reason why that was is the hardwire, which I had powering the camera on my bench here. And you can see, you know, I'm using a multimeter with a power supply, feeding it directly. Well, originally I bought the hardwire kit, this guy right here that GKU recommended, and that was apparently an error. I guess they must have copied the wrong link or something, because as you can see, right, this one only has 2 wires, right, power on or power and ground. So how is this supposed to know if it's in parking mode? Well, I never could get parking mode to work with this, and you know, it makes sense since there's only 2 wires. So I instead, you know, went and I saw that this had a, you know, this is your standard mini USB, and so I bought a generic hardwire kit that has 3 wires, right? Yellow for accessory, red for constant on, and black for ground. And that is your typical parking mode hardwiring setup. And so the way that this works is, well, when you take the power away from the yellow wire, which is accessory, then it tells the camera to go into parking mode. And when I hooked up this hardwire to the camera and went to the options menu, all of a sudden, hey, look at this. We now have a section in here for parking mode. And the funny part is if you look at the manual, all right, so we're looking at the manual here where it's showing you the app, it also doesn't show you that parking mode section. So you have a hidden section of the app that only comes on if you have a hardwire kit that actually is parking mode capable. Now, if we look further in here, right, you can see turn on or off parking mode, and this says parking monitor motion detection. So what that would make you think this does is if you have some type of motion in front of the camera, then it would start recording a clip. This is how most motion parking modes work. However, I didn't find that the case. You know, I could wave my hand in front of the camera, you know, dance and do whatever, and it would never trigger a parking mode video file. And if you look in the manual, it actually talks about the parking modes in number 3 and 4 over here, and it actually doesn't say anything about motion detection. It says when it detects an impact, or you can, you know, use the time-lapse mode. And well, I did find that to be true. So if you go and you take this and you hit it in parking mode, then it will start recording a clip. But motion detection, I did not find that to be true. So I don't really think that this, you know, parking monitor motion detection is actually what it says. It might be lost in translation. Now you can see it does have 2 modes, right? You have impact detection only, and then you have your time lapse, which you can change between 12 or 24 hours. And your time lapse, you can change your FPS between, you know, 1 and 5 FPS. And, you know, this mode does work pretty well. You know, it does what it says. You'll see the red blinky light telling you that the camera's on in parking mode, and it will just constantly record at the specified FPS. So which parking mode is better? Well, I think with just the impact detection, there is a fatal flaw with that. And we'll send the camera into parking mode. I'm going to detach my yellow wire here. We'll wait 5 seconds. You hear that little beep. That's the camera saying it's gone into parking mode. And now what I'll do is I'll give it an impact so that we can make it record. But you know, you can see motion-wise, I'm moving my hand in front of the camera. There's no red blinky light, so that tells you that this, you know, that should be all the proof right there to show you, hey, the motion detection actually doesn't do motion detection triggering. But if I do an impact detection, oh, I guess I got to hit a little harder here. There we go. We saw the red light blink once.
Start recording.
You hear the ping and it says start recording, but that lag from when I actually hit the camera and when it started recording, you know, that was more than just a couple seconds. And this thing, unlike other cameras where it'll record the previous 10 seconds or something and then the following 20 seconds, this doesn't start recording until you hear that ping. So that means whatever impact you have, you're not actually going to catch, and instead you have, you know, let's say 3 to 5 seconds for the culprit to get away before this thing actually starts capturing. So for that reason, I don't find this impact detection very useful, and instead I think you're going to want to use time-lapse recording if you're using parking mode. Now, this generic hardwire kit I got, it does have dip switches here to select what voltage, you know, the automatic low battery voltage shutoff should occur at. And at least for this particular kit, this was actually incredibly accurate. You know, right now it's set to the low as 11.8, and you saw my, you know, my multimeter setup here, so I can toggle the voltage of my power supply and see, and it shut off right exactly at 11.8. You know, I dialed it down to 11.83, didn't shut off. 11.8, it was still on. I went to 11.79 volts, and then it shut off. So, you know, props to this generic kit. There are other kits you can buy for this camera that would hardwire. You know, they just have to be this style, 3 wires with the mini USB. So if you wanted the name brand one, you know, Viofo, the HK3, that's the one you would get. Or, you know, you can get one of these generic ones, which, yeah, as I found out, work quite well, and they come with a bunch of fuse taps and fuses.
Okay, now it's time to take a look at the video quality of the GKU D200, but what does that really mean on its own? Well, you know, it's a little bit hard to say, so I've brought in the benchmark, the Viofo A119 or A129 into the picture so we can compare and see for a significant amount of money less how the D200 compares. I think what immediately becomes clear comparing these two is the color difference. Looking at the D200 on top, right, we can clearly see a much more yellow or warmer tone, and I also think that hurts the contrast a bit here. If we look at, you know, where some of the shadows are, or just even the shadows off of the rear of the vehicles in front of us, right, you can resolve the details on the bottom Viofo better versus it's all kind of blends into one color of shadow black for the D200. So it's a little bit more difficult to make out what's going on there. Like if we look at this Model S in front of us, that's very clear, right? You can see more of the details in that trunk face on the Viofo compared to the D200. As we pass this Model S here, take a look and see if you can resolve the license plate. You know, I think one of these will show a lot better than the others. And also, you know, we're going to be coming up on these 2 vehicles ahead of us where we can once again take a look at the license plate quality on the white SUV to the right. And looking at that, I think it's pretty obvious that the D200 is good at capturing macro items within the picture, such as other vehicles moving, but I think it really loses out on those fine details like license plates. So if that's something that is really important to you, you're going to have to go up a price tier from that $50 mark towards that, you know, $80 to $100 mark in order to kind of get that capability. Another thing you get with that one level up tier of camera is better image processing, and what I mean by that is look at the noise within the image itself. If we look at, you know, just big blocks of single colors like the sky above, or if we look at all the edges such as on the vehicles and different, you know, road textures, curbs, signs, etc., right, obviously we can see a lot less noise in the Viofo's image compared to the D200s. So just something else to think about if that matters to you, if the fine details matter. If the fine details don't, then quite frankly it doesn't matter too much. Alright, it's time to take a look at the nighttime footage, and to be honest, I had to double check which files I was using here because this is a complete role reversal. On top, right, we have our GKU D200 again, and on the bottom that Viofo A129 Plus, but unlike the daytime where The A129 looked way more natural and just better all around everywhere. In the nighttime, it's very clear that the D200 is just standout. The A129 on the bottom is just kind of washed out, and that really hurts the contrast versus the D200 up top. You know, we can see that Pleasanton sign overhead a lot better, and a lot of the details on the periphery so much better, such as, you know, under the overhangs and awnings along the sidewalk. Even as we get really close to the vehicle in front, looking at the license plate, it should look more crisp to you on the D200 compared to the A129. Coming up ahead at the next stoplight, there's going to be a street sign at the very top of the light, and pay attention and see which camera you can read the street name more clearly. For me, it was definitely the D200, which I could see sooner, and also just when we were even stopped, I couldn't quite make it out on the A129, but I could tell what it was on the D200. There was less glare on the sign from that top stoplight, whether it be red or when it switches to green. So just another interesting point here, showing that the D200 really does excel at night. So overall, I think the GKU D200 is an okay daytime camera. You know, it's not going to capture all the fine details, it doesn't have the best image quality, but it'll still capture, you know, those macro movements and things like that happening. I think this camera does excel at nighttime, where surprisingly I feel like, you know, the image quality is better than the day and better than competition costing more money than it. And overall, this thing does give you a pretty comprehensive package, right? You know, it's a easy, simple to use single channel system. It does have support for a hardwire kit, so you can buy a third-party one and install that. It does have some level of parking mode, although, you know, once again, the impact detection one isn't all that great, so I would stick to time lapse, but there in time lapse it is, you know, plenty reliable. And overall, you know, it's not bad at $50. So if you require better daytime fidelity, definitely go up a price tier to that, you know, Viofo, the standard, the benchmark. But otherwise, if you do a lot of nighttime driving and you just want something that's simple and easy to use and covers the basic functionalities of the dash cam, the D200 is a good option.